Barnyard Language. We are Katie and Arlene, an Iowa sheep farmer and an Ontario dairy farmer with 6 kids, 2 husbands, and a whole lot of chaos between us. So kick off your boots, reheat your coffee, and join us for some Barnyard Language, honest talk about running farms and raising families.
In case your kids haven't already learned all the swears from being in the barn, it might be a good idea to put on some headphones or turn down the volume. While many of our guests are professionals, they aren't your professionals. If you need personalized advice, consult your people.
Welcome to another episode of Barnyard Language. It is fall. The leaves are falling. I have a giant maple-filled driveway. And Katie, do you have the same in Iowa? Is it autumny?
It is autumny. It's been quite windy, so we don't really have a lot of leaves in any one place. Is Levi still living his best life out there in the leaf pile? We watched that a number of times.
Yes, the dog does enjoy playing in the leaves. Today is not his best life day. We did finally get his shots done. It was our 3rd attempt. So this is a Jack Russell who is, I'll say 85% a good boy and 15% a little jerk. And especially when vets...
It's a Jack Russell, Arlene. That
yes.
seems pretty on brand.
It is on brand, yes. And so, especially when vets come around and want to do things like prick him with needles, he is not a fan. So this was our 3rd attempt, and this one, they doubled the dosage of meds that they were trying to give us to kind of sedate him. And we were wearing gloves, and I threw a heavy coat over his head this time, and we took 3 of us, but we got him pinned down and gave him all the shots that we could. So he should be good for a little while. But he was mad.
Well, and it seems like it's always the small dogs, and then it's more frustrating because it's like, he weighs, 10 kilos maybe?
Yeah, he's under just under 20 pounds.
Close enough to him to pick him up.
No, you wouldn't be allowed. You're not even allowed to pet him.
When I visited Arlene, for our listeners, I accidentally petted him. I was throwing the ball for him, and he brought the ball back, and I just reached down and petted him. And I think we both realized about the same time that I was petting a dog who didn't want to be petted, and that I was not the human he thought I was when I started petting him, and it was a very quick distancing.
Yes. He's very deceiving. Yeah, he's quite deceiving because he'll come up with you full tail wagging, happy face, but yeah, just throw his ball. Don't try and touch him.
But it always feels a little more ridiculous when the dog that's taking 3 full-grown adults to sit on them weighs 20 pounds.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if it was like a Great Pyrenees or something that was, pushing 180, it would be different. But
yeah, he's just got
a 35-pound Aussie who's got the same sort of personality. I get it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we drilled winter wheat in yesterday, which was a new thing for us. It's part of a cover crop program. And the boy child, I think I had told folks earlier this summer he planted a few kernels of corn in the middle of the yard, and he has, I think, 6 stalks and 10 or possibly 11 ears. He's very proud.
Wow, his own little crop. And did you cut grass around them all summer?
I did.
That's very nice of you.
Yeah, but he's been disking it and weeding it, and hopefully not fertilizing it too much.
Yeah.
Who knows? Whatever. So it's going to be a real good day when we get the combine out for that. For 6 corn stalks.
In the middle of the lawn.
Yeah. How are things at your place, Arden?
Things are going well. So the dog got his shots. That was exciting. And last week, my husband, Hugh, ended up having just a day procedure at the hospital. He had I'm calling it a nose job, but he had
It was a nose job.
Yeah, it was a nose job. Yeah. So the septum on the one side of his nose, like his nasal passage basically, was collapsed or bent, or I don't know. Anyway, there wasn't much air getting through, and he decided that he would like to be able to breathe out of both sides of his nose. So he went in and went to the hospital on Monday. So we were in and out, and in the morning, I think he had to get dropped off at 6, and then I turned around and picked him back up about 12:30, 1 o'clock. And so you know how farmers are. We all know how farmers are. So the instructions from the doctor were 3 weeks. He had kind of scheduled 2 weeks with less duties, and at a week, which was this morning, he was back in the barn, but not milking. So we'll give him that. So he's not supposed to be lifting anything too heavy or doing anything that would strain his face and he really doesn't want to get hit in the face right now either. So yeah, no milking, but he's doing a few other light chores, and he was around for herd health this morning and those types of things, and lots of paperwork is getting done. So yeah, that was our week. So we have a high school co-op student with us right now, and so she and I were milking together in the morning. So she survived her first week of having to get up every morning to milk. She did a great job. So 3 cheers to you, Carly. And yeah, so she was milking and then going home to shower and go into school for a bit each day. So she did great, and we managed pretty well. Not too many calves born, which is always a bonus when there's one kind of main less person in the barn. But yeah, we got all the things done. So that felt like an accomplishment. And this weekend we went to a haunted house, which is not my favorite thing. I'm a big wimp. I really don't like scary movies or things like that, but it was very well done. It was at our local museum, so it was lots of like volunteers and stuff. And my third child, a couple of his friends and their parents were the people doing the scaring, so we went to kind of see what part of the house they were in and get scared. So my kids were much braver than me.
Yeah, I'll admit, I think we're going to do trunk or treat this year because it's on the Sunday afternoon instead of at 7 o'clock on a school night in the middle of the week. And there's bounce houses at trunk or treat, which my kids are pretty stoked about. So
That is pretty fun too.
fair trade.
And then you get to go to just one place.
Yeah.
I have heard of trunk or treats from like parenting forums and stuff, but I don't think that's a thing here. I've never heard of or seen one. Basically, you just go trick or treating on Halloween.
Yeah, we've never gone to one, but they're going to have, it's at the county fairgrounds, and there's food trucks and bounce houses and people handing out candy, and it sounds much more desirable on my end of things than hauling around in the dark, especially when it's supposed to be cold and quite possibly raining.
Yeah. The cold and rainy Halloweens are not the fun ones for sure.
We've got snow in the 10-day forecast, so
Boo.
see. I mean, it was like the one flake symbol, so
Sure, but that's still a snow.
But-
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, and we're done with fall calving, and the rams are in with the ewes. So one thing is finished and one thing is starting.
Yeah.
So there's
The cycle of farming, right?
that. It's like
Today it's put on the storm windows day, so you know it's getting cold out. We need more than a single pane protecting us from the outdoors.
for the it reminds me, I was actually going to post a reminder, but for those of us who have the permanent storm windows, this is your reminder to close your damn storm windows before you close all the windows for the season, and then realize in January why it is so damn cold in
Yeah.
random places in your house. Because I'm always the one who forgets to close the storm windows, and then there's a storm in like the second week of January, where it'll blow out of the east, and I'm like, why is it so cold in here?
Yeah.
And then I realized that all the storm windows are still open.
The window is covered in crystals.
Yeah, yeah. When there's actually snow inside the windowsill.
Yes, yes. That's your sign. All right. Well, let's bring on our guest for this week.
We are welcoming to the episode Karen Moore, who is from Eastern Ontario, just like I am. And Karen, we start each of our interviews with the same question. So this is a way to introduce yourself to our listeners. And we always ask, what are you growing? So for our farming guests, that covers crops and livestock, but it can also include families, careers, businesses, social change, awareness, anything. So what are you growing, Karen?
Well, I am growing my knowledge of living off grid in Eastern Ontario. I started from a very small knowledge base, so any movement forward is progress. And also growing 4 amazing young people who are my children, but I can't really call them children anymore because they're all adolescents and young adults. And I would also add growing knowledge and awareness around the needs of children, youth, and adults who experience life from a different place, and really working hard to kind of change our idea about what that means for people, and trying to change the world, one interaction at a time. Just little tasks, that's all.
Oh, yeah, yeah, minor stuff, really. So can I ask, just because I'm curious, what is the motivation, or what brought you to living off grid? What was that experience like?
Well, I would like to say it was, because it was the environmental thing to do, or because, it was a dream. But the honest truth of it is that we bought 23 acres in rural Eastern Ontario, and had a dream to build a house on it at some point. COVID hit, and we decided, oh, this is the perfect time to build a house. And when we decided to do that and talk to Hydro about putting in the hydro lines, it was going to cost us an exorbitant amount of money. And so the decision was off grid was going to be less expensive. And so that was the real reason. But now that we're doing it, it's kind of exciting, actually. It's kind of cool to, I know it kind of sounds hokey, but it's neat to know that you're creating your own hydro when you plug the kettle in, or when when anything is being, anything uses electricity. It's like we created that, like we grew that, if you will. And so my excitement for it has grown from actually doing it. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. And I'm sure that you think about your usage a lot differently than those of us who just plug it in and there's power there, right? I'm sure there's more of an awareness of how much things use and what you're using it for.
More awareness. Also, I know the weather better than anybody else. I can tell you when the sun is going to be out and how many days of sun. And we really love kind of the April to October time frame, because we don't really have to worry too much about what we're creating. The October to March time frame, a little less reliable. And interestingly enough, it's even increased our communication as a family, because we have to negotiate now, right? These ideas of, well, if you want to use the air conditioning, then you can't use the dryer. If you want to use the PlayStation, then you have to think about whether or not you're going to use the microwave. Or, on the really, really cloudy days in the winter when we don't get a lot of sun at all, it's like, we don't use the dryer for that many months. We don't use the microwave. And so it's created some really cool conversations as a family about compromise and choices, and just being really more mindful about who we are in the world, and having to give in sometimes because somebody really needs to do something and it has an impact on somebody else's hydro use. So it's actually been a really cool opportunity.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So you said your kids are older. Can you tell us their ages and how many of them are still negotiating power usage in your house?
So all of our kids are adopted. And so our eldest is almost 28, and we adopted her at 3.5. Our next eldest is almost 20, and we adopted her at 9 months. Our next eldest is 18 and a half, and we did a foster with a view, or a concurrent placement. So we fostered and then moved to adoption. He came to us when he was 5 weeks. And then our youngest is 17 and a half, and she came to us at 2 days.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Busy house.
lots of and lots of different ways and arrangements, I'm sure, of how they came to you.
For sure.
So, Karen, we're talking to you today because of your expertise, both professional. Can you tell us, in your own words, about your background and your work and such?
Sure. So I'm a registered social worker, and I have a private practice here in Eastern Ontario, working primarily with families who are walking the journey of neurodiversity and and or adoption and permanency. So one or the other or both. So I do a lot of work with children, youth, and families where the initials of FASD, ASD, ADHD, all of those labels and initials come dancing through the journey. And we have a lot of those initials in our family life as well. So I dance that dance professionally and personally. And a lot of work in really thinking about what does neurodiversity mean and the impact of neurodiversity on individual lives as well as family lives, and really trying to navigate some of the complexities that I would say sometimes often don't need to be there, but they get created because we often have a kind of narrow sense of what neuronormative is. And if we would actually just expand our sense of neuronormative, a lot of the barriers and a lot of the challenges wouldn't exist. And in fact, I could be unemployed, and I would love that. I mean, I would obviously move on to a different level of employment and do something else, but I would love to not have to be helping people navigate some of the complexities that are kind of put in the way of children, youth, and families because of the way that we perceive neuronormative reality. I think the reality is everything is neuronormative, and we have created these social constructions around what's diverse and what's not, and what's acceptable and what's not. And it's those human creations of those labels that actually create the difficulty.
Yeah, I'm absorbing all of that. Well, I'm thinking, so you shared your four children are all adopted and they
Yeah.
had various journeys themselves. Can
Yeah.
you tell us, without getting too personal into their own experiences, but as a parent, how did you navigate those journeys, both kind of individually and separately? Because I'm sure that they all impacted each other, and like the family as a
Mm-hmm.
unit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd like to say we navigated them brilliantly every single time, and I can't even say that with a straight face. um,
Well, you're a professional, so I mean,
e-
obviously you did, yeah.
exactly, and I think that makes it more difficult sometimes, right? Because I think that there's an added pressure that I put on myself, and that systems put on me. That if I'm a professional doing this work, that I must have it all figured out when it comes to my own journey and my journey with my kids, and that's far from the truth. My kids have been my best teachers, actually. Um, but we've navigated, difficulties with doctors, with schools, with recreation programs, with family expectations, with our own expectations. We've navigated parenting dilemmas and strategies around, do we consequence more, do we consequence less, do we take things away to change behavior, do we, all of those kinds of messages that we got like everybody else did around, this is how you parent a child who is neurodiverse. You do more of this, you do less of this, you add this, you subtract this, you just need to be more consistent, you just need to be more open, there was always, you just need to be more of, or you just need to do less of, or and so those dilemmas, I mean, they still follow because each child is different, like you said, Arlene, right? And so what worked for one child isn't going to work for our next child, and isn't going to, and what worked for child one on Monday might not work for child one on Monday afternoon, right? Like it worked
Yeah.
Monday morning, but it's so. I think that um, you know, came to a learning of the fact that what really mattered in all of this, and I speak about this often in the adoption work that I do, and the work that I do with families, and in my own journey as a parent, is that what really matters at the end of the day is the relationship. And I'm always now looking at that being my guide to decisions, intervention, strategies. At the end of the day, will this add to my relationship with my child, or will this take away? And My favorite saying, my partner and I, our favorite saying is 5 years from now, is this going to matter? A year from now, is this going to matter? And if it is going to matter, then what do we need to do to ensure that this is going to matter well? And if it's not going to matter a year from now, why? Why are we invested in this? Why, is it peer pressure? Is it pressure from family? Is it pressure from the school? Is it pressure from wherever? And really being able to use that as our touchstone around, the relationship with each and every one of our kids is what matters the most. And that's what we're going to use. That relationship is what's going to keep us going in the tough times. And it's also going to be what keeps us going in the easy times or in the good times, right? And so really kind of thinking about, when we're trying to come up with a strategy, when we're trying to come up with a next step, when we're trying to figure out what the hell do we do now, what's the impact going to be on this relationship? And that served us well. It served us well, and it has given us the opportunity, I think, sometimes to kind of sit back a little bit and give some time for reflection. There's very few things that we've learned that need immediate response. Of course, safety issues do. Issues around life and death, absolutely. There's an immediate response there needed. Issues related to, the fact that one of our kids has done something they weren't supposed to do, or they haven't done something they were supposed to do, that doesn't need an immediate response. That can give us a time to reflect, think about who they are, think about who they are in this interaction, who we are, and what do we want to move forward so that our relationship remains intact and we move forward from a place of connection. So it's an important piece, I think.
Yeah. I think that is really important. And I agree with what you're saying, that sometimes those outside pressures end up creating a sense of urgency that isn't there, right? Where if you have a teacher who is only teaching your child this year, they want to see results within, this time period, before the next report card, before the test, all that kind of stuff, or, whatever the situation may be. But you're right. Sometimes our responses are going to be things that take longer or that aren't going to show an impact for a long time. So thinking about things in that more long-term connection type journey is really important, whether our kids are neurodiverse or not.
Yep. Yep.
So, Karen, I just added a question here, and I hate the wording I'm about to use, but I couldn't really come up with anything better.
Fair enough.
Because all four of your kids are adopted, how much warning did you have about the likelihood of them being neurodiverse, especially knowing that they were all young when they came into your family?
Yeah.
It seems like adopting older kids, you tend to get more warning, but
I think even with older kids, we sometimes minimize the potential. I mean, I think the reality is adoption is trauma, right? And so whether or not a child is adopted at 1 day old or a year old or 5 years old, the fact that they are going through an adoption journey means that they've experienced a trauma and will continue to experience that trauma for the rest of their lives. It doesn't mean that trauma always has to be traumatizing. It does, though, mean that the reality is they will always be adopted, and that will have impact in different parts of their lives. So I think, I think as an adoption community, and it may be different in different provinces, different countries, as an adoption community, I think we're working hard to be more upfront and honest about the fact that we often don't really know about kids' beginnings, right? There's often huge gaps. And some of that can be minimized with people taking, more knowledge and thought about how to document things and keep track of things. But some of those things aren't known, right? Like if, for example, a child comes into care at the age of 5 or 7 or 8, there might be years and years and years of experience that we don't know about. especially and including prenatal experiences, right? So when we're talking about FASD, which is a particular interest and area of expertise for me, although I use the word expertise in a very light way because I don't consider myself an expert at all. When I say expertise, it's that place of curiosity and passion about um, enlightening the world about the realities of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder and the way that we can absolutely change trajectories if we clue in quicker sometimes, and if we, and if we have some of these honest conversations and look at some of the barriers that make it difficult to be able to have some of these conversations. I think for our kids, we got as much information as was known, but I think there was much more information that could have been known. And there were, lots more places where certainly, I mean, we adopted our kids 20 plus years ago. Well, 15, 20 years ago. And even the concept of, adoption being trauma, or the idea of, kids, even, that idea that kids have a life before. We often, I think, in the adoption community used to kind of think once kids were adopted, it was almost like they had a new beginning, a new start. And I'm so glad to say we're much more enlightened about that now, and recognize that it's one person, one life, one journey, and that it's about addition, not subtraction, right? It's not about a new beginning when a child moves into adoption. It's a continuation of a journey. And I think we still need to do a lot better in knowing and sharing and talking about the histories of, the possibilities of, the realities of the impact of trauma and adoption on children, youth, and adults.
This is still my question, isn't it? I just added a whole bunch of questions in here. So, well, now none of my questions make any sense in the order they're in.
It sounds like my life.
You can adjust.
Well, I feel like I'm going to move one of these questions up and see if that helps things. So, as someone who my own neurodiversity was diagnosed at the age of 40, and realistically, it's been a part of who I am forever.
Yep.
But, it was one of those doesn't perform to expectations
Right.
sort of things. How do we deal with learning such crucial parts of who we are as adults? Especially for women, there's been such an explosion in the last few years of people who are reaching a place where we're completely redefining what we know to be true about ourselves. And especially trying to raise children when you're learning so much about yourself at the same time is really, really strange. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, I guess.
So I think I have a couple of thoughts as I hear you speak. I think the first one is, I honestly believe that our children know the truth about their identity. They know who they are, and oftentimes adults, systems, etc., don't recognize that truth or try to convince them of a different truth. And so I think that when adults get diagnosed, as adults with a neurodiversity, it's not this thing that comes out of nowhere. It's this recognition of a truth that has always been, but was never honored. And it was always trying to be packaged in a different way, in a way that the adults around could explain it or understand it, sometimes from a limited understanding of what the possibilities could be, right? So especially, like you said, for girls and women, the idea of neurodiversity is often missed, right? And or we come up with other ways of trying to understand those behaviors and those existences. I think I think that's why I'm so passionate about the fact that I really want us to understand and really see kids for who they are, because we have that identity formation all the way along, right? From the time we're born, we start to create through all of those different child development stages a sense of who our identity is. And if we find out at the age of 15 or the age of 18 or the age of 20 or 30 or 40 or 60 that there's a significant part of our identity that we didn't know or that wasn't acknowledged, we have to kind of do some backtracking, right? We kind of have to go through those identity formation stages again, and if you will, get to know ourselves from this new place of truth. It's a similar journey when I'm working with families around the adoption piece, and they're saying, we haven't told our kids they're adopted, and they may be, teenagers, young adults at this point. And my first thing to say to them is, somewhere in your child's sense of who they are, they know that they're adopted. They have that in their DNA, right? And so I guess my long-winded answer is, I always hope that we can help people understand their truth as soon as possible, so that we don't have people trying to re-understand themselves 20, 30, 40 years into their lives with this new lens. And I really want to repeat again that I don't think the lens is new to them necessarily. I think it's this way that society or that the world has been able to translate them. I think people know their truth, and they often get silenced in that truth and saying, no, that's not who you, no, the reason you're acting like this is because of this. And we come up with other explanations other than the truth. And so understanding neurodiversity, being able to, and this comes to one of your other questions, so I'm going to jump to it, and sorry for that I'm jumping to your question, but that idea of labels, right? Labels can be misused, and they can be things that people use to hurt people. That belongs to the person trying to hurt. A label that helps us understand and honor. I want us to create a world where people feel honor about having ASD or FASD. I don't want people to feel and think that because I have FASD, that means there's something wrong with me. I want there to be a world where people say, I have FASD. That's so that you can help understand better how I experience the world. So for me, the difficulty with labels doesn't come with the label, and it doesn't come with the fact that that label explains things. It comes with the misinformation, the difficulty, the hatred sometimes of people who are using that label. Yeah, so I don't know if I answered that question. I kind of went on a rampage there. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah.
No,
It does, because sorry, go ahead, Katie.
I feel like for some folks it's really swung in the opposite direction now that we see, autism is a superpower. And I am, for example, for myself, I am very good at my job, in large part because of the way my brain works. But to say it's a superpower is also it's just as reductive as saying that the way my brain works is a huge problem, because it does make me very good at some things. But I don't know that I'm going to call being late either 20 minutes early out of anxiety or late for basically everything ever to really be a superpower, and that it's just as reductive to see it in this toxic positivity kind of way. But at the same time, trying not to cure people of something that is not wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with the way my brain works. It just doesn't always work in a way that is the easiest to deal with the way that society thinks that it should be working.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be a real, it's gone so far in the other direction too that it's such a superpower, and that doesn't seem to be something you hear from anyone who is neurodiverse.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to just be a over acceptance perhaps from other folks.
Yeah, and I think we see that often, right, where the pendulum swings from one extreme to the other. And I think, when we're talking about spectrums, I think really what we really want to do is honor the whole spectrum, right? And not one extreme to the other. Bad, good, superpower, deficit. All of these extremes, I think, are meant to, they're meant to divide, right? They're meant to, when in reality, I think it's that piece of we all have brains, all of our brains work differently, and that we need to kind of challenge the social construction that we've come up with around valuing some brains more than others or some skills more than others, and really see holistically that all brains have values, all people have value, and rather than trying to divide ourselves. So yeah, I think the pendulum does often swing. We see that in many cases, and I'm not sure pendulum swings to either extreme are helpful.
I wonder too how much of that comes from medicalizing neurodiversity, that it's, I mean, if you're diabetic, basically you are diabetic or you're not diabetic. Like, there's not a lot of spectrum in there. Or you have cancer, you don't have cancer. That's a pretty, like, this or that thing, where being neurodiverse is a huge range of all sorts of things. And no two people are neurodiverse in the same way, where two people can be diabetic in more or less the same way. And so I wonder how much of it is just that medicine is not a great approach for the basics of how brains work, from a healthy brain standpoint.
Well, I think.
And now I'm just totally off, totally off into. Oh well, people know to expect it by now. If this is the first episode you've listened to, apologies. This is basically what it's like. So now I'm going to let Arlene ask her questions so that we can get back on track.
So we've already been talking about labels, and
Yeah.
Katie, I don't think you're off base. I get where you're coming from. So
Yeah.
I know that I've heard some people say they don't want to label their kids, and I really love what you're saying about people knowing who they are, whether or not they've gotten that news or diagnosis or all of the context that they need. They understand themselves, but maybe can't always explain it to other people, or it doesn't maybe make sense for them to in society potentially, or like you said, the way the world sometimes works. So some people say they don't want to seek diagnosis because then their kid will get labeled in that negative sense, right? And so they might be concerned that seeking diagnosis means that they're actually limiting their child. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on the actual testing, diagnosis, that kind of stuff, or if you feel like your child has some differences that maybe you don't understand and are starting the process of looking for support. Like where do you even start, and what do you feel has value in that process? Like how can parents seek the support that they need, both as parents and for their kids to learn how to understand themselves better?
So I think that the concept of labels comes, and it kind of comes back to that medicalization piece, right? Where we need the label to access the service, or most services. Although I think services are getting better at not needing labels. And I think that it still comes back to that place of the label itself is not the problem, in my opinion. In my opinion, it is the baggage that comes along with some of those labels, and the assumptions, and the discourse that comes with some of those pieces. And I think what we really want is for children, youth, and adults, for that matter, to feel a sense of pride and a sense of wholeness in who they are. So I do think it's individual. I think, different kids have different needs and expectations about that. Some kids, it really helps them to have meaning, if you will, externalized meaning, to make sense of their behaviors or their needs, or, why, for example, for one of my kids, they could never walk into a birthday party if it had already started. They needed to be there first. They needed to kind of get grounded. They needed to kind of get a sense of the space before, if you will, all hell broke loose, right? And the sensory input and the sounds and the people and the movement and and when we were able to put meaning to that, and we put meaning to it from a place of saying, this is just how your brain works, right? Your brain needs to feel a sense of peace and anchoring in a new space before you then have to interact with tons of other people. Your brain just likes a chance to, kind of chill for a little bit. And for you to walk into a room that's already all happening, your brain then doesn't get the chance it needs to settle to then be the best that it can be. So being able to provide meaning to that, whether or not we used a label or not, I think it's the meaning making that makes the difference. I think the labels, unfortunately, fortunately, I think there's a debate on both sides. The labels are what help us access the services, right? So they help us access the funding. They help us access, whether it's respite services or speech services, or without the label, you're not going to easily access some of those funding services, or even services in the education system, right? Around, like in the Ontario system, that IEP, IPRC process of being able to be noted with, having exceptionalities, which is a word I have a problem with as well. I think, realistically, and not that I have the power to change the system, but if I did, I would love every student to have an IEP. I would love the IEP process to be a process attached to student wellness and student learning and success for every student, not just students who are seen as having exceptionalities. So that's why I continue to do the advocacy work I do, so that I can change the system so that every child can get an IEP. Until then, having those labels, per se, those diagnoses, make the journey easier to get some of those things that make the playing field equal, right? So, like I said, for one of my kids where sensory issues are really significant, for them to walk into a classroom of 30 kids is huge for them. It takes so much energy. And the child beside them, whose brain doesn't work like that, they don't have to use any of their brain power to walk into that classroom, right? It doesn't mean that that child's brain is better than this child's brain. It means we have two brains who process environment and information differently. That's all it means. And because the environment that we're asking the child to be in is a room full of 30 other people, we need to adapt that environment for that brain to work. If the environment that we constructed is a room with 3 other people, we wouldn't need to adapt the environment for the brain, right? So it all comes down to the fact that it's not about individual people's brains and their neurodiversity per se. It's about the systems and the way we've created environments that adaptations need to be made because of the way that the systems are there. So the labels help access service. They help with the advocacy. They help with a shared language sometimes. Um, there's still room for people, as you said earlier, right? Not one person with neurodiversity presents in the same way. Neurodiversity is neurodiverse, diverse, right? And so a label of ASD or a label of FASD gives you, a sense of a community of realities. It does not tell you who child A is because they have FASD. It gives you a sense of child A may have, a menu of 500 different realities from child B, and you as the adult in that system, whether you are the parent, the teacher, the coach, the doctor, need to then step up and be able to be curious about what does FASD look like for this particular child right now, and know enough about neurodiversity to know that that doesn't mean that that might not be who that child presents and is tomorrow, based on, the environment, based on how well they slept last night, based on, if they have some trauma triggers about something, right? Like, so I think the labels help to cue, or should help to cue, other people that there's a need for curiosity from a place of kindness and care, not curiosity from a place of hatred or gawking, or like that negative curiosity, but a place of curiosity, be able to say, I need to work hard to know who you are, not because of the label, but I need to work hard to know who you are because you're another human being, and I should be doing that with everybody. The label just helps me to cue that I need to do this a little differently, possibly.
Karen, I love that idea of all children having IEPs, or even all people
Mm-hmm.
just having some sort of individual human program
Mm-hmm.
where we would just have this, because kids can be a pain in the ass. All humans can be a pain in the ass.
Yep.
That's just the way they are.
Yep.
But if it gives somebody a heads up that maybe my kid or myself has a reason for being difficult that isn't just that they're a pain in the ass,
Mm-hmm.
that maybe that clock ticking is legitimately impacting whether my kid can listen to something,
Mm-hmm.
or whether I myself can listen to something.
Mm-hmm.
And how much that is informed by what we're interacting with. I work in software. Probably half of my coworkers are neurodiverse
Right.
if we really got down to it. I work remotely. For me, having a diagnosis of every part of how my brain works really doesn't matter, because I'm in control of my own life and nobody cares. But for my 5-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
where the risk of them being labeled as difficult or non-compliant or doesn't work up to expectations or whatever else can be very different. But I'm wondering, as a neurodiverse adult, how do I know if my kid needs more exploration of how their brain works, or if they're just weird? Does that make sense? Like, my one kid is very focused on their interests and does not like loud noises and does not like flashing lights and all this, but how do I know if this is something that needs more understanding and support, or if I just say, my kid doesn't like loud noises? And does it
Mm-hmm.
matter one way or the other, I
Mm-hmm.
guess?
I think it's a great question, and I think it's a question that parents ask themselves all the time, right? Around, do we need to go further with this? Do we need to get some help with this? Do we not need to? And I think there's no right answer, but I think the place where I land on this often is a place of, are these pieces of them interacting in their ability to lead the best life they can lead? And if they are, then I lean to the point of maybe we need to get some more information here to see if we can minimize the difficulty this is having on their lives. If it's not, then I'm like, I got no problem here to solve, right? Like, yeah, loud noises really bother them. Okay. And, I personally don't like corn. And, I like for me, and I'm not saying it to minimize the impact of the loud noises. I'm saying it as a way of saying that we all have things that we don't like, that are difficult, and we need to make some decisions about whether those difficulties impact our life to a point where they're affecting our ability to live our best lives, beyond our ability to problem solve it, right? So I will use my ridiculous example of not liking corn to, I can use my skills to manage that, right? In a restaurant, I don't order corn. I don't buy it at the grocery store. If I'm at a friend's house and they serve it, I eat what else is on the plate. I can use my skill set. I can use the ability I have to problem solve to minimize that need, that impact on my life, right? If my friend were to say to me, every time I serve you food, you don't eat it, and it's really upsetting me, and I'm taking it personally, and I don't think you're a very good friend, and I don't know how to problem solve that and manage that and have that conversation with her to say, it's not about your cooking, it's that I don't like corn. Then maybe I need to be looking at how I can come up with some different strategies or some different ways of doing it, because it is impacting my life. That analogy of the corn was really bad, but I went with it because I started and I couldn't stop. But it really is, does the need outweigh the ability to feel like you're living your best life, and you can't use the skills or the resources that you have to mitigate any negative impact that it might have?
I think that's a really good analogy, honestly, as someone who, and I legitimately know that this has come to a shock to a number of people who know my daughter now. When she was about 2.5, I pushed hard for early intervention for speech services because she had 5 words. And she was so frustrated and so angry, and the rest of the family was so frustrated and so angry because she had so much to communicate and no skills to do so. And that was a huge problem. And I ran into her speech therapist recently and asked if perhaps there was some sort of money back guarantee, because she now literally talks in her sleep, talks all the time, never shuts up.
She's
But
using
that level
all
of
of those
frustration,
words.
oh yes, at length and repeatedly. I don't know how in our family, I mean, nobody else is talkative at all. But then looking at our son, who is quite bothered by loud noises, but it has to be really loud before it's a problem. So maybe it's just that he doesn't like loud noises. And if it's not really impacting his day-to-day life, I mean, not liking corn is not going to cost you job opportunities, probably, except like professional corn eating, I guess. It's not probably really impacting your social life. It's not probably really messing with your head. It's not a real problem. So, if my kid doesn't like loud noises, but it has to be took him to the circus this weekend and he wasn't super stoked about it because it was very loud and very flashing lights and a lot of people, that's not a thing he's going to run into on a daily basis. So if it's not impacting him on a regular basis, then hand the kid a pair of earplugs and
Yeah. Yeah. And you
don't
can
worry about
mitigate it. Yeah. I think that, it can get to a place though where, the not liking corn, if I have a visceral reaction, right, when I see corn on the plate, and it causes me to have anxiety, and it causes me to, oh, how am I going to manage this? I don't know how to manage this. I don't know what I'm going to say. They're going to be upset with me, then corn could be an issue, right? Or I avoid going to certain places because I'm afraid that corn's going to be on the menu, or I start to look, in an obsessive kind of way at the ingredient list of everything to see if corn is, even if it's illogical that corn would be in the ingredient list. But so I think it can get to that place, right, where it could be this simple kind of piece that then manifests into a difficulty. And I guess that's what I'm talking about, right? Is anything can be and anything can't be. And I think it you need the context, and you need to really be able to balance that with the resources that someone has to mitigate the concern, and recognize that, today I can manage it. Maybe 6 months from now it becomes a bigger issue and I need to move into a different way of looking at getting some assessment or getting some
I
intervention.
think even your example, Katie,
I
about
think, Karen,
sorry, I was just going to say your example about speech therapy, or, like sometimes kids can, I'm going to talk from the way our house was for a while. A child who maybe has some struggles, you can manage well at home. But then once they enter the school system, it gets to the point where if they can't self advocate, and it's impacting them both socially, it's impacting their teachers and their classmates, that depending on their age and stage, there might be resources that you need now that you didn't need 6 months ago, or that you won't need 6 years from now,
Yeah.
or a year from now. But there could be points along the journey where you do need support, because there are going to be things that are unavoidable, or that you need them to access those services or do those particular things that it's, beyond your ability to mitigate the things that they can't handle or that they're struggling with. So that piece of what's okay in some contexts, when things change, then maybe you do have to seek support, or look for services, or figure out what the underlying issue is, and then see what you can do to help them in those specific times, or places even.
And a lot of times I hear from families that, kids will hold it together at school, and when they come home, all hell breaks loose. Like they've held it together all day. It's been really hard for them. But when you talk to their teachers or their peer group, it's like, oh no, they're doing just fine. On the outside, they're doing just fine. On the inside, they're working so hard to give the illusion that they're doing just fine. That when they get home life for the next hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours is extremely difficult. And it's hard because the cause of the distress was something that you don't have control over, and it's hard for you to mitigate. So you're dealing with the outcome of the distress, but not necessarily being able to change the cause of it. So oftentimes I'll have families coming looking for support, and saying, people think I'm crazy because the teachers say, they're doing such a great job. And when they go to grandma's house, they're doing such a great job. And when they go to their friend's house, they're doing such a great job, and great job. And, and the only people who are seeing the struggles are, parents at home. And the parents are coming and saying, are we doing something wrong? Because how are they holding it together in all of these other environments, but then with us we're seeing behavior, we're having outbursts, and oftentimes that's the explanation of that, is that home is the safe place for them to be able to then expel all of the energy they've had to hold in those places where they've had to work really, really hard, even though they haven't been doing as well as it looks like they've been doing.
I guess the thing I wanted to add to that, as someone who is neurodiverse and dealing with that, is that the problem doesn't have to make any sense to anyone else for it to be a legitimate problem. If corn has become an obsessive issue that is causing you real problems, it doesn't make any difference whether I think it's ridiculous or not. It needs to be treated as a real thing. I didn't realize until I was 40 that other people don't experience things as physically painful when they're bothersome. That we're not talking about, oh, I don't really like that light. That we're talking about, physical and emotional actual distress. And that if something is causing distress, it does not matter if it makes any sense to anyone else. That it needs to be treated and respected in the same way as you would presumably, deal with a physical injury to your child.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
if it is causing them distress, you would deal with it because that's what we do.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's even the person themselves can't put meaning to it. They just know, right? And so sometimes we get caught in this cycle of trying to have them explain. Tell me what's going on. What's it? And they can't put words to it. All they can say, right? Like it's just yuck. And I can't tell you why, and I can't put meaning to it, and I can't make this a cognitive process. I can just tell you that viscerally this causes me pain or discomfort, or it just feels horrendous. And and oftentimes we're looking for meaning so that we can try and come up with solutions, when sometimes what we just need to do is bear witness to it and be there and have empathy and really help to be in relationship at the time to help somebody work it through, because it's that discomforting and it's just really hard, and that's what they need at the time. And so sometimes the answers aren't there, and we have to be okay with that.
So you've
I think that's such a great point because I think, if somebody breaks a bone, we don't expect them to explain to us what pain is. And there's things that are universally bothersome and distracting to such a degree. I don't know anyone who wouldn't be distracted by mosquitoes in their ears or a fire alarm randomly going off. It's pretty expected that those things are bothersome.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't expect people to justify being bothered by those things or justify being in physical pain. And, I think we can just understand that we don't have to understand what is causing a problem. We can just deal with the results of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering about a lot of our listeners, and we are from rural places where sometimes the the services don't always exist that we might need, or we're sometimes more interconnected than other people. We kind of have to we have to live in community, and I mean we get to live in community, but how can we support other families and other parents adapt and be supportive? But a lot of, especially with people who are still trying to, in our communities, who might be struggling, because we're talking about a lot of the positive aspects and being able to figure out what's going on in their families. They can go through times where they are really struggling and feel judged or can't access the services that they need and are then feeling really alone. So how can we be more supportive in our communities of people who are struggling?
Well, I feel like that's a pretty loaded question because there's so many layers there. Because you're right, there's not enough service, and the service that there's often a wait list, and like there's lots of barriers sometimes to accessing service. I think some of what we can do is we can look to kind of non-traditional places to provide support, right? So I think about, the parent in the grocery store with the child who is having a meltdown about something. And I think about how much difference we might be able to make as we walk by them if we just say to them something like, I see you and you're doing a good job. And we just keep walking, right? Because I don't know about you, but I've certainly had the experience more times than I want to remember of having to try and manage and mitigate, difficult behavior in front of other people. And one of the first places I go as a parent, as a member of the community, is shame, right? Like, I'm embarrassed. I don't, and I give myself a lot of negative self-talk of, and I may not be necessarily using all of my skills or all of the, the things I have to my advantage, because I just want it to stop, right? Like, please, can we just stop? Can we just get to the,
let's
like,
get to the car. Yeah,
outta
let's
here.
get to the car, and then you can
Yeah.
do this there.
Yeah, exactly. And, I may have, bribed with chocolate bars, anything to just make it stop, right? And the difference that it can make when you can just see that knowing look from someone that's not judgmental, because that's your worry, right? Is that people are judging and thinking you're somehow doing something wrong, when all kids have all adults have temper tantrums, for that matter. Like, let's be honest here, all human beings do. And so why do we not see that we have such power as community to just give that pat on the back, or that you got this, mom, or the statement of way to go, dad, you're working hard, or even just a look, right? An eye to eye contact that says you're not alone, right? I think we can do those sorts of things. I think we can think about ways that, we can encourage connection in our community, right? So some of the initiatives around, the benches on the schoolyard, so that kids can, if they're feeling alone, they can sit on the bench, and not in a way of feeling excluded, but in a way of normalizing to say, I'm feeling alone and I would like a friend. And it's not a shameful journey, and it's not a journey of, oh, let's feel sorry for that child. It's a journey of, it's okay to express a need, and for that need to be acknowledged as a valuable need. And I have, as a kindergarten age kid, I have the power to change that trajectory for that friend of mine today. They're lonely, and I have the ability to play with them, right? So I think being able to do those sorts of things, I think being able to ensure that we have information available in ways that people can access it. I used to work in the violence against women community, and we would often leave information taped to the back of the bathroom stall doors, so that people can read it in a way that they don't necessarily feel, because people can feel embarrassed or shameful, and they shouldn't have to feel that, but they do, because of some of the structures that are still in place. So, especially in rural and small communities, you may not want to ask your neighbor for help, because your neighbor is also the person your life is intertwined with each other, right? And so if you want to have some of that privacy, thinking about ways that we can provide information that's accessible but private at the same time. I think also one of the groups that I'm a part of is the Rural FASD Network, and it's a network that's been started by parents, and it came from a place of saying, we don't have what we need for our kids and for us, and the agencies aren't doing it. We're gonna do it, and it's one of the most amazing sources of information and support and empowerment that I know, as a professional and as a parent. So thinking about, how can I make the difference in someone else's life? Maybe, for example, I don't have a child with Down syndrome. What could I do that could make a difference for a family in the community that does have a child with Down syndrome? I don't have to walk the journey to be able to use my individual power in the community to make a difference for others. So having awareness, thinking about opportunities that I can have to make a difference, and recognizing that no effort is too small, right? Because if 20 of us do a really small thing, it can make a huge difference. And like I said, even those looks in the grocery store, right? Even those, at the community meeting, if you know that a parent is really struggling, going up to them and saying, you know what, you're doing a great job. I just want you to know you're doing a great job. Or I just want you to know I notice you. and I notice you in a positive way. Being able to do those little acts of kindness to be able to help people feel like they belong, and they belong in a way that isn't shameful or isn't something that they need to be worried about, I think can make a huge difference while we're still working hard to advocate for system and social change, right? I mean, we have to do that big piece as well. But those individual interactions relationally can make a huge difference in the journey of a parent who is parenting a child who is making, sometimes makes the journey hard. Sometimes it's exhausting. Sometimes you feel like you're all alone and you're doing it all wrong. And, having the person in front of you at Tim Hortons buying you a coffee, they have no idea how much difference they just made in your life. Like, you can do simple things like that too if you have the economic means to do that, or, those simple things can make a huge difference. Like I said, while we're still trying to change the world.
Yeah. Yeah, because changing the world is the little things and the big things, right? Because like you said, on an individual
Yeah.
basis, telling somebody that they're doing a good job could stick with them for years. And to that one person, that did mean the world, right? So that's really important to
Yeah.
remember. I know as
Yeah.
our children grow up, the ways that, kind of the educational system or social systems interact with our kids change, as they get older. I know you have teens and adults, so you know what I'm talking about. So I'm
Yep.
wondering if you have any insight for those of us who are parenting older children who are neurodiverse, both in kind of helping them self-advocate and yet still being involved enough to support them in those times where they can't really self-advocate or haven't learned those skills quite yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, once again, it's a recognition, first of all, that we're working with a system that is not what it should be. Um, because if it was the system that it should be, then we shouldn't have to advocate. So that's kind of my baseline, right? Anytime I have to advocate for something tells me that there's a lacking in the system. And that's not a blame of the system. I mean, the system has been created, for eons, and we make changes and we make adaptations, but systems are slow to change, right? And systems tend to work better when they kind of look at, kind of the collective mass of the majority of people would work well with this, right? So anybody who's on either end of the extremes of that majority, the system doesn't work the best for. So I think we have to acknowledge, first of all, that we're working in an imperfect system. And that's not meaning that there's anything wrong with our child. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with their parenting. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with what we are doing per se. Maybe you are doing something wrong, but it's not the default, right?
We'll just assume that not.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And that sometimes it's not because our kids can't advocate for themselves. It's that they can't advocate for themselves in an imperfect system. And so there are times where we may need to continue to do that role, not because of a lacking in them, but because the system is not set up for them to be able to use those skills in a successful way. And I'm always looking at that kind of loss gain kind of, analysis of how much is this going to cost for us to get this outcome. So yes, maybe they can self-advocate and continue to work and continue to do, but the cost of that is too big compared to what we're going to gain from them doing that piece. And so I'm often having those conversations with myself in the mirror, with my partner, with my kids, like which battles are we going to fight here, right? And I come back to that piece of, is this going to matter a year from now? If it's not going to matter a year from now, why am I making a big deal of it? are they learning some skills or gaining some things that they can't get any other way? Then it might be worth it. Could they gain these skills or gain this information in other environments that would be less difficult, less challenging, maybe less affecting of their sense of self? Maybe then I'm not going to, I'm not going to walk this walk. Is this going to affect my relationship with them? And if it's going to affect my relationship with them in a negative way, are there things I can do to make amends for that? Or if not, I really have to ask myself if it's worth it. It always comes back to that relational piece, right? And what's the gain here and what's the potential loss? I think that, helping systems to remember our kids holistically. So, I advocate often with systems for them to remember not just the things that my child may need help with or is challenged with, but all of the strengths and the wonderful things they bring as well. And when we only have 20 minutes for the IEP meeting, or we only have oftentimes we can jump really quickly to okay, what do we need to figure out? What are the needs here? What are the deficits? And I'm like, whoa. That doesn't set a good tone for me. It doesn't set a good tone for us if we're going to be deficit or negative based. So, helping to set tone is often something that I still do. I do a lot of advocacy behind the scenes. I do a lot of scripting with my kids around, these are some of the things you might want to ask. I do a lot of kind of, even now there's times where I attend meetings or I attend appointments online through texting. So I'm not in the room, but I'm there on the text so that if there's a question or, sometimes I'm just sending an emoji, right? So I'm keeping that relational connection there to say, you have all of my power, you have all of my connection, you have all of my knowledge with you in the room. And you can access it how and when you need to. And there's no shame in wanting or needing to access it. You're no more successful if you access it or if you don't access it, right? The concept of success is if the outcome is your needs are met in a way that you can be the best person that you can be. And so trying to change the messaging about what's a successful meeting or successful intervention. Independence did not always mean success. I am not always at my best independently trying to do whatever I'm doing. I'm often usually actually at my best and able to maximize my best self in relationship with colleagues who can help together. And so this idea of independent advocacy or being able to do it on your own, I think that's a bit of a misnomer, actually. And I think we could probably change the music on that a little bit to everybody's benefit.
Yeah, those are some great points. I mean, I know even as an adult, there are times where you go into an appointment and you want your partner, a sibling, a friend to come with you just to have another set of ears, or to remember to ask that question that maybe you're not thinking of at the time, or have a podcast co-host, right, Katie? Because we often work better when we're using other people's skills as well as our own. That's a good point. I wonder too, do you feel like there's any benefit in talking to your older kids about the gaps in the system and saying, this isn't just about you, like we're facing a system that doesn't necessarily work for us, so we're going to have to do these things together, and I will help you, and this is because of the system, not because of the way you are as an individual, right?
Absolutely. And I also talk to my kids a lot about the fact that the system doesn't just work for them, it doesn't work for most of the kids, right? And so, when they're talking about, a colleague of theirs who's struggling, we often have that conversation of, do you think the system's working for them? Because what I want is also to make sure that my kids know that they're not the exception here. that most of the systems that we have are systems that many kids struggle with, and they struggle with it for lots of different reasons, right? So kids who have anxiety issues, kids who have gender diversity, kids who are neurodiverse, kids who like for body image needs, like there's so many um, realities of our humanity that make our systems make it difficult for us to be okay with who we are, that I would say the majority of humans in various systems aren't okay with being involved in those systems, right? And so I actually want to normalize that, not just for my kids, but the kids and families I have the privilege of working with, that the reality is that most of us are not okay with these systems. That you're not the exception because it's not meeting your need. That we have to be changing these systems because they're not meeting many people's needs, um, and that then creates a community of actually being um, a community of recognizing that many of us aren't getting our needs met in the various systems that we're interacting with.
Karen, I was just thinking about how important it is to help our kids start learning to advocate for themselves when they're little, because, little kids, little problems. And as much as it can be a pain in the ass, and I might wish that my children would quit telling me what they want, because it would be easier to just do what I was going to do, there are certainly times that taking into account their preferences for things is a very important way to teach them to advocate for themselves. And considering that we have the entire legal profession literally to advocate for us when we can't do it ourselves, asking for help and asking for guidance can be really important. I'm wondering, as a neurodiverse parent who struggles a lot with things like timeliness and habits and routines and all of those things, how do we raise our kids to not learn our habits, or to let's just not talk about my kids' chore charts. Okay, let's just not. It's really hard to teach your kids skills that you don't have. And as much as people say, well, they'll learn that it's important to just keep working on it, which is absolutely true. There are still things that it would be better for them to just do, even if it doesn't come naturally to me. So how do I make my children be better people than I am, Karen? Despite the fact that they are 5 and 6 and I'm 42 and still can't keep my shit together. Help me out here, please.
Well, I actually think the answer is in the question, which is, I think that, first of all, we want our kids to learn that we all have areas of growth and areas that we struggle with. And we want our kids to learn that it's not about being able to manage everything. It's about being able to recognize the things we can't manage or we don't want to, because there are also things we just don't want to, and look at ways to get that need met in a different way, right? And so I think it's about that concept that, you said earlier about, wanting kids to learn how to advocate for themselves early. I think we also want kids to learn how to advocate for others, right? So when they see a child who has a need, they can advocate for their peer as well, and see that they have something to offer to that person, not just for themselves, but they have a gift to give to that person. So, when it comes to things that you as a parent may not have strength in, I think we then look to others who do have strength in it, right? And I'm always saying to my kids, not so much now because they're teenagers and they know I know nothing, but when they were younger and they still had the belief that I might actually have some knowledge, and they would ask me a question or ask for a skill that I didn't have, I would really clearly say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how to do that. That's not something I'm good at. Let's figure out who does know how to do that. Let's look to somebody who has expertise or knowledge in that, or, you know, the internet's become a really, I mean, within reason, right? Because you have to be able to gauge the effectiveness of some of those internet resources. But, you know, organization's not one of my skills. I'm not neurodiverse as far as I know. Maybe I am, you know, it's possible. I'm certainly not organized though. And so when I'm looking and I recognize that my lack of organization is not a skill I want to pass on to my children. And so I'm looking to, if there's other people in my family who have organizational skills, if there's places on the internet where we can look for strategies and ways to be organized. I'm always looking for things that are play and fun based, because brains always do better if it's fun, or if it's exciting or interesting. And the definition of fun is always individualized, right? What I feel like would be fun may not be fun for you. But if our brain is feeling energized and excited about it, it makes the task easier. And I now have experts within my family. Like, one of my kids is brilliant at organization and cleaning, and it didn't come from me. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. They've developed those skills because we had a curiosity about how to develop them, and we looked for resources and sources outside of ourselves, and they have now created and have a skill set that I still don't have. And so I think it is that idea of recognizing that you will never have all of the skills and abilities your kids need or want, and creating that community, or that interest about being curious about where
Different
you can
places, and
access
I
those
have loved our
skills can be the
conversation today.
answer.
And I feel like we should probably start. So I feel like we've gone in a lot of to wrap things up before we go into like another whole hour of talk. But I'm hoping that you can share maybe some of your go-to resources, be it websites or books, or resources that you think would be helpful to people either in the adoption community or in the neurodiversity community. If you have any thoughts on things that you find helpful, or maybe refer to your clients or things like that.
Yeah. So I have a couple. The first one is in the adoption community, and these are Ontario resources, but they're on the web, so they're accessible to anybody. So the first one is the Adoption Council of Ontario, and I do need to, be honest here that I also do work with them. So there's a bias there, but I think it's a fair bias. I think they're a great organization and a good resource. Tons of online information, webinars, education experiences, lots of free resources on understanding adoption, trauma, prenatal exposure, neurodiversity, tons and tons and tons. So that's at adoption.on.ca. For parent support around adoption, Adopt for Life. So it's adopt4life.com, offering parent support and information, parent support groups, just really tons of great information around that support area around parenting kids who are on permanency journeys who are adopted. Another shameless plug for an organization that's close to my heart is the Rural FASD Network. Once again, that's the network I was talking about that started from a group of parents around a kitchen table saying we need more, and created this amazing resource that has an online presence as well as an in-person presence. So a really, really great resource. And I'll put a plug out there if people, want to connect in with me, they have questions, they've heard something that I've spoken about on this podcast, they want more info about, they can find me at cpprofessionalservices.ca. So CP, the letter CP, professionalservices.ca. And I'd be happy to, expand on things or give some more info about things. There are tons and tons and tons of resources. Most of them will be listed on the adoption.on.ca, and they're not just adoption resources. So they're about, parenting kids who are neurodiverse, around dealing with trauma, around talking to kids about difficult things. Tons of resources on that site. So I think I'll rather than list off more, I'll just send people there, and also encourage people to connect in with me if they have specific needs, and I'll try hard to direct them to resources.
That's perfect. That's great. It's good to have it all in one place too.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So, Karen, since we're wrapping up in the interest of this show not being 4 hours long, we ask all of our guests, if you were going to dominate a category at a county fair, what would it be? And categories can be real or made up to ensure that you win.
I was going to dominate a category. I think for me, and I don't know if this answers your question properly, but for me, it would be the person who got to sit on the merry-go-round the longest, and I would beat the merry-go-round longest riding kind of, and I could sit on it for hours and hours and hours and not have to leave, and nobody would be on that merry-go-round longer than me, because I love the merry-go-round and I hate it when it slows down and you have to get off.
That is impressive, because I could last probably a few minutes and then start to feel nauseous, so I would not compete with you at all. Be like, you get that category for sure.
All right, I win.
Yeah, that's right. Are you a ride person, Katie?
I love, I'm compiling a list of ways to tell me you're neurodiverse without telling me. I love the tilt-a-whirl. And the girl child, also anything with that centrifugal force, we are here for it.
Yeah. That pressure on your... Yeah.
Weighted blankets, tilt-a-whirl, all of it. Love it. Anything upside down, no. Hard no on anything up in the air. But if you want to leave me on the ground and spin me around in circles, absolutely.
Cool.
Although I can say that drinking a fair amount of beer and then getting on the gravitron, bad idea. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it forces the alcohol through your liver faster.
That's a whole different thing.
I've ever had. Bad choice.
So we will go ahead and move into our cussing and discussing segment, and listeners know that they can either leave us their cussing discussing on our speak pipe, or you can leave a voice memo or send us an email and we will read it out for you. Katie, have you got something to cuss and discuss, or cuss or discuss this week?
I do, Arlene, and it's kind of a two-parter. One, I really hate when you're, I don't want to say taken aback, but kind of surprised and left wrong-footed by something, and so you don't react as fast as you might want to, and it leaves someone else with a negative opinion of you. Mm-hmm. And the second part of the same cussing and discussing is the tremendous lack of a commonly used singular gender-neutral way to refer to other humans. My daughter was corrected by a server at a restaurant this weekend as to that person's preferred pronouns, which is absolutely fine with me. I appreciate that they did it. I really appreciate the level of vulnerability that put him in. I feel very, very bad that I did not react as quickly as I should have to thank him for correcting us, because I was trying to think to myself if I had used any gendered pronouns at all, because I try pretty hard not to in general, because I think gendered pronouns are kind of bullshit. And especially with folks where my first perception of who I might think they are may or may not match how they identify themselves. And as I tell our children, we believe what people tell us about who they are. And so whether it makes sense to us or not, if they like corn, they don't like corn, they identify
Yeah.
in a way we don't
Yeah, that's right.
understand
We believe them.
or
Yeah.
that we might not immediately jump to. I'm going to trust what you say about yourself. But the fact that there is not a good way to refer to people that is not gendered in a singular way. I frequently use y'all to refer to a group, but there's really not a good gender neutral singular pronoun.
Yeah.
And there should be. Not a pronoun. A way to refer to other humans.
Right, yeah, to address.
That doesn't sound like hello fellow human who is a human.
Greetings.
Just humaning.
Yeah.
Yes. Greetings, human.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just go with that. Anyway, so if any of our listeners have suggestions, I really would love to hear them. Karen, what would you like to cuss and discuss today?
I think for me, it is building on what we talked about earlier and the difficulty of feeling shame when I or other parents are doing a damn good job and other people's reactions make me or them feel like we're not, when they have no frigging idea what my life is like or what we just were going through 10 minutes ago or a year ago or how far we've come. I think, thinking about how we can manage that better maybe, or how that can not matter so much, or not have as much impact, because I think it really affects a lot of us, and it shouldn't take that power away from us. So I think that would be what I would say.
Yeah, agreed. I think out of
Arlene, what do you
yeah,
have to,
I was going to say, out of our conversation today, the one thing I'm thinking about is, I mean, in terms of systems, there's obviously lots to improve, but I think especially in rural places, one area that I know our family has struggled is in finding recreational opportunities that work for our neurodiverse kids. And I'm not blaming the people who run the programs, because especially in rural places, it's mostly volunteers, and it's hard to get volunteers at all. And so, I mean, people end up doing the things that their kids love, or, that they're running programs that work for them, or that, they're following a structure that's been set out for them. And so that's what's going to work. And there aren't the same options, just based on geography and the number of people who live in the places we live. So some of the things that might work better for our kids that get offered in urban areas don't end up where we are. And the things that are here don't always fit. So then it means that some of our kids miss out, which is really, really difficult. And sometimes those of us who see the need for programs don't have the capacity to start a thing or run a program. When you're in the trenches and just trying to figure things out for your family, to try and start something new might not be something that you can do right now. So, I mean, I guess maybe I look 10 years or maybe 5 years down the line and think that's maybe something I could do something about on a bigger scale. But right now it's just something I'm going to cuss about. I don't know if you've had similar experiences, Karen, with that side of life.
Absolutely. Or and I get it, I understand it, but the idea that, child can participate if parent attends, and that idea of, oh, yes, okay, I didn't think we were signing up so that I could also do this, or this. And,
right. Yeah.
but, making it work but sometimes just wishing that I also could have the hour to myself that the other parents are having. And, when my kids were younger, sometimes, or the school trips, right? Where the school trips where, yes, you can go, your kid can go as long as you go with them, or you send somebody, it's hard. It can be hard.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Or you've got other kids who you're also trying to manage. Yeah. So it's not always possible. So we want to thank you so much, Karen, for joining us today. You already gave us where people can find you, so we're good on that end, but thank you so much for being with us and for having this discussion with it. We both really appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure. It was a lovely conversation. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Karen. Thank you for joining us on Barnyard Language. If you enjoy the show, we encourage you to support us by becoming a patron. Go to www.patreon.com/barnyardlanguage to make a small monthly donation to help cover the costs of making the show.
Please rate and review the podcast and follow the show so you never miss an episode.
You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok as Barnyard Language, and on Twitter we are Barnyard Pod. If you want to connect with other farming families, you can join our private Barnyard Language Facebook group.
We are always in search of guests for the podcast. If you or someone you know would like to chat with us, please get in touch. We are a proud member of the Positively Farming Media Podcast Network.